My name is Gregory Allen McCollum, GREGORYALANMCKOWN, Houston, Texas. State ID 28632893. Now, the Department of Motor Vehicles keeps my address private. No one can access the records. I haven't been driving a car since I got into Texas anyways. But also, I never applied for a voter's registration card in Texas because that becomes public information. And the only way I can keep my own residence private was by not having a driver's or a voter's registration card in Texas. So all the assaults against me were done by those in knowledge of government records and files that they knew where I was anyways and made their assaults. Now, the stories that I have to tell, we the people who have the right, with information that's on the news that 75% of the American people are concerned about the high prices. Well, when you get 30% of your wealth robbed by higher prices, including the 30% trade tariff taxes on foreign goods, and then illegally Wall Street adds that price of 30% onto our American goods to match the price of the European goods, putting an interstate tax themselves on our American products fraudulently, because there is no right to tax these goods, but they raise the prices anyways. Now, what this does, that the Americans can buy 30% less of their products, which means England and Wall Street can take 30% of the American production out of the country for their communists to feed on. And our 30% pays for that consumer goods being taken away from our nation and sold overseas in the Empire of England, communist. So literally starving America to feed England. That's why you're going to end this federal communist government of England Balfour Act of a Jewish Wall Street conspiracy to defraud the American people of their wealth. We'll quarantine the nation and you'll all be able to eat again. We'll have so much food, putting a famine on the rest of the Empire of England communist, that we'll have to store up food in warehouses around the country in all the counties, because there'll be so much excess food that we are not going to feed the Empire of England communists who hate our guts. And famine is one of the words of war in the book of Revelations. So the American people know what they have to do. They have to unify, mobilize their effort for this referendum of a petition of a redress of grievance of we the people, create that 75% state citizen legislature right of Article 5. Doesn't matter if you're having a voter's card or not. There is no restrictions that if you're in the United States, you are a state citizen legislature member. And just It doesn't take 3/4 of the state legislatures elected. It's just 3/4 of the state citizens of all the amalgamation of the legislatures. And the other 25% have to surrender to the 75% who are the majority. And if they don't, and they're communist kidnappers, and they say, you can't defraud us of our communist government in America, and the 25% want to commit insurrection as a federal communist government of England, to commit armed overthrow and kidnap the other 35 or 75%, well, you know what's going to make them angry. That you are going to dissolve their government and starve their Empire of England communists around the world. And when they commit themselves to a federal communist government that they think they can kill Americans as insurrectionists, when this is a government that's committing insurrection themselves, because they're supposed to protect, defend, and preserve us, and they're not doing that. They're trying to kidnap us and strip our nation naked. Now, I was looking at an old movie, and one of the gentlemen said there's 300 million Russians. Well, and I understood that. Wall Street Journal report that there was 295 million Russians in 1993, 1994, 1995. 25 years later, in 2020, there's only 146 million Russians. The Jews killed half the nation in 25 years. But of course, that's just an amalgamation of the total of 1.5 billion they killed in 100 years, since 1917 to 2017. The Jews don't give a damn about any ethnic. 200 ethnics were slaughtered in Russia and exterminated by the Jews. And they hide it and say, well, we're all Russians, we're all born here. You're all the family of murderers born there. And now we got this war going on of these Russian murderers, and they can't find any workers, they can't find any soldiers, and they're torn between, do we put the men in the factories to work, or do we put them on the battlefield to die? In World War II, the Russians had 600 million, and Adolf Hitler had only 146 million. Now it's reversed. Now the Europeans have 600 million, and the Russians only have 146 million. So who do you think is going to win the war? So this is why Trump is a communist, as a secret Jew calling himself a Christian, wanted to build a Trump Tower in Red Square. That he wants to kidnap the United States military and our industrial production so he can defend Russia in a battle against Europe. Defend England in a battle against Europe. He wants to return back to World War II, where the Jews are fighting Europe again. But first, they have to kidnap the United States to do that. So one of the stories that I didn't relate earlier about the Trump-Clinton connection, where Trump had his 15 years of tax-free exemption because of a $1 billion loss. That in that $1 billion loss, the plan for England to rob the Southeast Asian markets. And then invade the United States and seize control of Wall Street, using Trump as the conduit to defraud the American people by selling short and not having to pay Congress any taxes. Over two crashes in March 2000 and March 2008, $16 trillion of American wealth were taken each time, and only $4 trillion was given to Congress the first time and only $2 trillion the second time. So of all of that fiasco of $32 trillion, $26 trillion was seized by England invading the United States with the $8 to $9 trillion he gave them to invade the United States after they burned their Southeast Asia money that was bank stamped from Asia, that they couldn't invade the United States. Everybody knew the money was coming from Asia, and somebody from Asia was invading the United States. So to cover up the invasion, England burned the money and Bill Clinton reprinted it all as if it was never destroyed or non-existent. Now, the first time they did the crash, they bought back into the corporation stocks to take majority ownership from 2000 to 2008. Dragged the American army out of the United States by the World Trade Center being destroyed. Then, in October of 2008, when they had the second crash, Jew England took over the control of the boardrooms of Fortune 500 companies, or even 500 more or 1,000 plus commodity stocks. Took control of them. Immediately after that, during the Barack Obama administration, 110 million people were thrown out of their newest Jew ownership, Jew England ownership of our industrial capacity, and Jew England threw everybody out of work. Everybody knows what happened, but that's the explanation that England, by Bill Clinton and through Donald Trump, had stabbed the entire United States in the back, throwing 110 million people out of their jobs, and 40 million homes were lost, mortgages. 40 million. Two people a home, that's 80 million. With a few children, that's 100 million people. Besides 110 million that got thrown out of their jobs, 110 million people were thrown into the street by Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump. And then they brought in the British Army into the United States to occupy the American homes in violation of our Bill of Rights and an illegal invasion of foreign conscripts by the Constitution into the United States. This is a confrontation that now you are going to be facing death because the federal government's going to hire this mercenary British Army as if they're the federal government. Now, Donald Trump, I should say, Barack Obama was real proud of his accomplishments. He created 56 million jobs in his administration. Well, let's take a look at the facts. 110 million people lost their job. In 8 years, 4 million high school students would come out of high school. 8 years, 32 million students. Add that to 110, that's 142 million looking for work. Only 56 million jobs were created. So if you do the math, 42 plus 44 is 86 million people were left hanging out to dry without work. So there was many ways of kidnapping and murder. England brings in, the story goes, 11,000 guillotines into the United States. So what are they going to do with these 11,000 guillotines in control of the English? They were going to set up factories where people could come into work, and all they're coming into is their own execution. The parking lot outside the corporate slaughterhouses were being filled up with cars of people driving in and never leaving again. In 2021, employers around America are saying, where are all the workers? The only other action that they did is they offered them foreign contracts to work overseas. Once they were out of the country, they ripped up the contract that they never came into their business. And when those Americans went overseas, they disappeared. They were taken into captivity. So these are some of the means and ways 86 million people were not going to be finding work in the United States again. And so the Department of Homeland Security is set up to make sure their security over this genocide machine of England invading to annihilate the American people from existence. And during that time, they shot at me so many times it was pathetic. They gave me poison time and time again. I had saved my hair all the way from the 1980s to now, from every state that I ever had a haircut. Only because when I heard the story of Napoleon was exhumed from his grave and they gave another autopsy, his hair had grown out. They studied it and found out that he was slowly poisoned to death because the poison was still in the hair. So realizing that the Jewish people were already on my ass to have me murdered, I've been saving the haircuts. And when the study is done, everybody will know how many times they attempted to murder me by poison. And of course, I could register 175 attempted gunshot efforts with multiple bullets and that counted for each one of another attempted murder, each bullet being a death, an intention of death. So that's why it's like 696 because of the number of bullets. Just fantastic. Besides the poisoning, the car accidents, the bicycle accidents, the little murdered by physical violence of law uniforms twisting my head, breaking my neck, and then God had to resurrect me. So now you know the seriousness of what those presidents have done to the United States and all the treasonous acts that they intended to participate in England destroying the United States. And now you know you got 75% of the American people still complaining about prices. And you can come together and you can end their government and you can challenge their guns, that if they don't surrender their guns, because there is no federal state ratification anywhere in America, they're going to fight you to death to kidnap this United States, calling you insurrectionists, when this is a federal communist state that doesn't even exist by any ratification. It was just created by the United Nations. Communist Empire of England is a capital, and you can't have two capitals in one state. So here we got a state of Maryland with two capitals in it, in violation of the law, because one of the capitals is the government of England. This is the federal communists that are going throughout the United States to kidnap them. Now, this is why I tell you, don't have any confrontation with these people. Don't walk in the street and protest. Stay away from them. Your confrontation comes through God in that Article 5 Constitution Convention, that you dissolve the presidency of Trump by a majority. And when they don't surrender because they assume their government of England has the right to kill Americans, they will initiate the hostilities, and then you can respond. Because they're not obeying the will of we the people and the majority, which is law. And they think they can use their extortion of threat to say, we'll kill you if you don't surrender. And that's not protecting, defending, and preserving the American people. That's not obeying the laws of the Constitution. That is a criminal conspiracy to defraud the American people of their life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So the serious consequences of what's about to happen is that you're going to avoid confrontations. But at those gatherings, spread the word and prepare the certification of Gregory Allen McCowan, Houston, Texas, state ID 28632893, state ID, to be appointed and elected the president by an Article 5 convention. This would repeat what George Washington had done when he was ordered by the legislatures for a Constitution convention. He created the law, gave it to the states, and the states then elected him president, by which he became president April 30th, 1789. So that would be an important day, April 30th, 2026, to say to Donald Trump, your government of England is over with. And when he wants to continue 1775 war to declare, you're all insurrection against the government of England, well, the government of England isn't a law in this nation. And that's the Jewish people, the Balfour Act. The Jews are a sovereign government in any land they occupy. So here we got the Jewish people invading the United States, claiming that they're the sovereign government of our nation by the laws of England. So they're going to fight to the death. They've already murdered 352 million Americans. They got 240 million Americans to kill. Yet. And to think, in 2022, we lost the equivalent of World War II casualties with 395,000 missing Americans in 1 year. And we only lost 400,000 Americans over 3 years in 4 years of war, but at least they were fighting. There was nobody fighting the kidnappers. But when you have a 75% of the American people assembled in their signatures of a constitutional convention of Article 5, and you don't even have to be registered to vote, the homeless, the vagrants, little babies signed by their parents, the elderly, and of course all the working stiffs that don't want to be slaves with 100% income tax. The government is facing Armageddon, that if they don't surrender, they have to kidnap you by force of arms. And when they attempt that, they'll never be forgiven. That act of treason is that 25% that are not signed in that book will all be hunted down and destroyed. Because they were given a chance to join the book of life, and they refused. So I'm not guilty of threatening them because I've offered it to them. And I've told you to stay away from their violence. Let them think twice about it. Because concurrently, I don't condone, don't order or give consent, and I'll take no responsibility for any violence, and especially the violence by the president is his own responsibility, and he's going to be taken and held into account for that later. Declaring there's a war in Portland. Jeez. What's he do? Did he give an ultimatum of unconditional surrender? So Barack Obama was real proud. He put 56 million people to work. But consider this. When 40 million of the British Army came in to occupy those homes with their children, their wives, at least one worker per home, that would mean that 40 million English were given jobs on Wall Street in place of you, which means only 16 million out of 132 looking for work were given jobs returned back to the American people. So you subtract 16 million out of 132 million. That's 116 million Americans potentially that disappeared off the face of the earth, either in captivity or slaughtered in the United States. So that's why we see all these English people in the news media, all these English people in the entertainment. We see them at Home Depot, we see them in Costco, we see them everywhere. Because the English took over the jobs of the United States while you got slapped in the face and thrown out on your face. Well, you consider all the Americans, at least 100 million or more, know somebody who lost their home during the Barack Obama administration. So this is the utter disgrace that when I offered in 2008 to be the President of the United States, no, they all laughed at me. We got a great plan with Barack Obama to destroy the United States. Well, here's Donald Trump continuing their Wall Street destruction of the United States. And here's your last chance to save the American people. You can rally. You can sign the petitions, register them, create the counts, cross-check the information. Don't need to put down social security numbers. Don't need to put down any voter's registration card number. Homeless can just sign an X. Probably put their few initials and even their birthday. And you'll know you got to remain calm while this is all formulating, because the rest of those communists are going to be agitated knowing they're going to be facing a majority of 400 million guns in the United States, and they will be outgunned. And then the other plan is, well, we're going to have to invade the United Nations Army into the United States to help kidnap the American people from fighting against their English government and all their English workers on Wall Street and all their slave masters, and fighting all their communist kidnappers for the last 55 years, taking away our children, as if the government wasn't guilty of doing it. So you can understand why I want you to remain calm. Now, I'll bless you with being bulletproof. You'll stand fearless in the battle, knowing that God wants you to survive because you're doing the will of God and you're serving the Son of God. And that federal communist government that doesn't have an oath of God has nothing to protect them from the wrath of God that's about to descend upon them. And those minority of communists will then suffer their own curse of kidnapping, and we ain't selling them overseas for anybody. And we're not going to be holding them slaves in America either. They're worthless pieces of shit like they deserve to be treated. And I buried a lot of shit of a dog that we had once. So the American people have a right to peacefully assemble, peacefully gather signatures, peacefully register, create the count, give copies of each of the pages to those citizens that have their name on it, because it'd be like a certificate of certifying that they did make a signature. Stamp it, emboss it, make it a legal document that you have their registered names as legal state citizen legislature members. And when we have 3/4 of the population of the United States, and probably more, because a lot of people aren't going to be so stupid not to sign the Book of Life, then the yoke of their federal communism would be thrown off our shoulders, and we can put the famine on the England Empire and let them starve to death. It says in Jeremiah 1 verse, I'll make them run. Facing an overwhelming number of their betrayal in America, they'll probably run right out of the country to escape what would eventually be the end of their government of England. Now, to cover up all this conspiracy, all these facts and figures, the Article 4 public records was supposed to show each and every state's citizen occupation so that no state could hide an invasion of a foreign conscript army. But when the Congress sealed the Constitution, Article 4 Public Records Consensus, they were preparing to bring in a foreign army of conscripts that none of the states would know that they were being invaded. And then with all these foreign conscripts in the United States, the federal government will hire them as a military force, and that's what Donald Trump is doing. He's raising his own private army using your taxpayer dollars. And that's illegal. The Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, gives the states the right to regulate and create their own militia, arm them, assemble them, train them. It doesn't give in the Constitution a president to raise his own private army. But that's what he's doing. So let him raise his private army. The more the merrier. Just stay away from them. If you're going to assemble one place to start taking petition signatures and they come on over to try and arrest you, just run. The day will come when Donald Trump will have his army already built next year and will come after the Constitutional Convention to arrest it, claiming it's insurrection, that the Constitution is violating the federal government of England, and he will have raised his private army to kidnap the United States. And you'll know what to do at that time. Now, as far as the Americans that are around the world, prophecy already mentions that. Once they invade the United States by the United Nations, kings of fornication, to kidnap the American children, and my weapons that I told you about in these videos that are being developed for your defense are there to stop their invasion. The punishment is that we're going to go around the rest of the world and we're going to inflict the devastation on them that they wanted to inflict on us. And then I'll gather the Americans that are lost around the world and bring them back from the four winds of heaven, as it says. But to do that, once we stop the invasion and destroy their international law kidnapping the United States, by which they invaded their federal communism in 1945, now, 80 years later, they're preparing their federal communism to bring in the entire United Nations army against the United States. And we won't have too many allies left alive around the world. They'll be fighting for their own selves, while we go after all the people that are fighting against them to rescue our Americans and annihilate their population from existence. So they'll want to call me Satan, call me a fascist, call me a dictator, everything but the throne of God as the Lord God Almighty, the Lord of Lords and King of Kings in the book of Revelation, chapter 19, destroying the army of the beast and all their people. And then the Americans can come back from around the world, by which they were kidnapped by the British Empire of communists as slaves. Since the Barack Obama administration, he can be so proud of his disgrace. So you Americans have your work cut out for you now. You have to survive the humiliation that Donald Trump has dumped upon the United States, and then we will give the retribution to the Jewish Empire of England what they deserve afterwards. Now let me get back to the reading here so that you can understand where it all began with the killing of Abraham Lincoln. A bullet kidnapped him and killed him, and then the federal communists building their Capitol building during the Civil War declared their 14th Amendment that they are now the federal communists in control of the United States, eviscerating all the state government authority of the Constitution. The state citizen legislatures were kidnapped by the federal communists from 1865 to 1868 and have been doing it ever since. Then they brought in their 1868 Jews out of Russia to fill out the population of the Jewish government of federal communists in the United States by their 14th Amendment. From 1868 to 1914, when World War I stopped the exit of the Russian Jews out of Russia, just before 3 years later, the Jews that remained would kidnap Russia and start the genocide, that all these Jews that came into the United States during that time was just another extension of the policy to commit genocide in the United States. Max de Mont's book, God, Jews, and History. Max de Mont's book said that 2 million Jews came out of Russia between 1868 and 1914. That was just the immigration numbers. By 1919 consensus, there were 6 million Jews in the United States, breeding like rats. To hide their growing Jewish population, Tim Carraway in his book 1984 said that all the Jews started anglicizing their name into English names to hide their actual Jewish population in America. So that's why we have so many communists supporting Trump, because they're actually anglicized names of Jews serving their government of England. And I did a quick study at every 35 years of this size of growth and multiplying, that there would be at least 60, 70 million Jews in the United States at this time. These are the Jews that won't sign the Article 5 Convention, because it is their desire as communists to kidnap the United States. And so, humor me that after the Jews went from 2 million in a short period of time up to 6 million by 1919, 200 years later in the 2020 consensus, there's still only 6 million Jews. And these are the wealthiest people in the world, billionaires, 90% of them, and they only got 6 million people in America. They are like a snake in the grass, hiding their numbers. They want to take the American people by surprise. So, the basic point is, this is how the government was supposed to operate. An original 1787 Constitution had state executive president, parentheses, governors, elect senators. So once the governor is elected a senator, he's a senator for life. He can still run again for the governor's office for a second term, but once he's unelected, he's now still elected a senator. He goes from governor to junior senator, and after the other proceeding of succession of new governors moving up the ranks, he goes from junior to senior, and the senior is retired. Now, if he's still young enough, he can go back into politics and try and be a governor again and do it all over again. By succession, the voted state executive presidents / governors already elected senators. Now, there's only one vote every 6 years for a senator. Not two, one. And so the only one person that could be elected is the governor as senator-elect. And if he remains the governor through successive terms, then The junior senator still remains there because there's no separate election for him. And the senior senator still remains there. This is the vested vote of what George Washington put in Article 5, that the suffrage of the Senate shall not be violated. In other words, once a governor, now you're a senator for life without having to be voted into the Senate. Once you're voted out as governor, now you just go through the ranks of pushing out the senior senator into retirement, the junior becomes a senior, and the governors become the junior governor in the Senate. This is the state suffrage. This was all changed by the 14th Amendment. Just threw all the governors out of the legislature, just threw out of the Constitution, threw them out of power, kidnapped the Constitution, and created a federal communist party, a federal communist state. The state of England. These members went into Congress, Senate, Senate or presidents, to select military academy cadets. So here's the governors. They're supposed to pick the military academy cadets from this state suffrage right in the Senate of Article 5, that they were supposed to maintain the authority over the military from their authority as governors. No Trump creating an army. Each state would then have their finest patriot families from 1775 military or militia for a military. Unfortunately, that all changed by the federal Jew England Communist 14th Amendment. New York City Jew England Wall Street billionaires selecting their Jew Communist Red Army cadets. Jew billion bribery and a federal Communist Congress puppets select Red Army cadets. This is their Jew 1775 British Army of turncoat Benedict Arnold fighting Americans. Now you got a communist army. They brought in all these foreign conscripts trained in foreign nations, giving birth to their children in America, passing on their foreign ideology to their children, to assemble in a communist army of New York City billionaires, and Donald Trump is now the newest 5 billion Bitcoin millionaire of New York City, raising an army of his communist conscripts to kidnap the United States. And I've been telling the Americans for the last 3-4 years, you got to start mobilizing your county, your militia county presidents, and register and assemble, because that's your constitutional rights. Now you know how angered Gregory Allen Collins feels about a Jew billionaire Red Army. You do not surrender my weapons superiority to Red Army military. This is the reason why the Lord God Almighty is going to win this civil war and a world war. Because there is no federal license that can seize the guns away from the state citizens. And so when I built these weapons superiority for the state citizens to defend their children, you can't surrender those guns as if you're surrendering your children to captivity. And when Donald Trump comes to try and seize those guns, it'll just be like Concord and Lexington. You either use them or you lose them. If you thought the military had trouble recruiting after 65 million abortions, that will end it all. Just tell them that you don't want to be a member of a communist military command. New England, 1775, British Army went to seize the weapons stockade of Concord and Lexington. There could be no freedom achieved unless the freedom to kill a Jew British Army existed. So with stockade in hand, powder, lead balls, and muskets, all militiamen assembled a line. Either use it or lose it. So you're not going to surrender my weapon superiority in the States. When Donald Trump comes with his army of Trump, illegal all that it is, to seize your weapons as a modern-day British Army now disguised as National Guards of the federal communist state, they're going to know what to do. So that's why I'm telling the American people, stay away. The entire United States will know what they're going to have to do when Donald Trump will not surrender to the majority that create a Lord God president. Jealousy by Trump is now that British Red Army Jews to invade and seize state weapons. State Citizen Bill of Rights to own and bear arms is not a federal communist license to deny. There was no federal communist license when the Bill of Rights was created. It's only after the federal 14th Amendment kidnapping that they assumed that they were going to control all the guns of the state citizens and take them away from them as slaves. With armed superiority in hand, nuclear ballistic railgun, you do slaughter their command. They're on the wrong side of the line. New York City Jew billionaire Red Army cannot be trusted, nor are they Americans or Christianity. They're just foreign military conscript invading the United States, hired by their Jew billionaire wealth to say that we can kidnap the United States. And that was the kidnapping of all of our children from milk cartons in the 1970s to the 395,000 kidnapped in 2022. New York City Jew billionaire Red Army War will hire a mercenary United Nations Communist Army. New England Communist Democracy of Jew billionaires has come to America to kidnap you. Jew Rabbi Detroit, May 2000. All Jews for one Jew and one Jew for all Jews. So here's all the Jews for one Trump, and one Trump is for all the Jews. He doesn't want to tell you he was born of a Jewish father, but that's the story he doesn't want you to know. So when Jew Trump kidnapped one American Gregory Allen McCowan, July 27, 2017. So here's Donald Trump kidnapping one American, Gregory Allen McCowan, July 27, 2017. I told you the story. Jew Trump kidnaps 100% of all Americans, August 3rd, 2025, by trade terror attacks, 30% robbery. He's going to kidnap one American, he's going to kidnap all the Americans. Now, Jews are demanding the arrest and imprisonment as an act of war on one Lord God. Can you imagine that? All the Jews are saying, we're innocent. We demand he be kidnapped. In the hypocrisy that the government's supposed to protect, defend, and preserve me, now the Jews are saying, there is no law of the government to protect, defend, and preserve state citizens. We can kidnap them. We're the Jewish government of England. And of course, England's been at war since the United States became a nation. All Jew rabbi want the act of war to make all American Christians prisoners of war. So if they want to make one Lord God a prisoner by their demand, it's an extension that they want to make all the Americans prisoners of war. And that's what Donald Trump said when he was with Zelensky. Isn't that interesting? I could suspend elections if I have a war. So he's going to fabricate a war before the November elections, and he's going to suspend them. But that's the importance of preempting the Donald Trump conspiracy with Article 5 and your signatures, your petitions, your embossed sheets and papers of registering your votes throughout the American people, having their own copies, and collecting and assembling 267,280,000,000 American voters' signature, not the actual American voters' signature, American state legislature signatures. Birthday. So Donald Trump wants to preempt the November election. And he's got this Jewish population to agitate and cause violence. And you don't have to be there. Let Donald Trump, let the communist agitators trying to create trouble get assaulted by Donald Trump's own communist army. So here are the Jews, similar to Donald Trump. Donald Trump kidnapped one American, Gregory Allen McCown, July 27, 2017. Jew kidnaps 100% of all Americans, August 3rd, 2025, by trade tariff tax, 30% robbery. Now Jews are demanding. The arrested imprisonment as an act of war of one Lord God after I've been released by the federal court. And all Jew rabbi want the act of war to make all American Christians prisoners of Jew war. So it is that God created a Lamb of God as an example in their criminal conspiracy of Jews. Even though the Jews destroyed 352 million already, only a public example assaulting a Lord God, ? Could the remnant of the American Christianity understand that a Jewish population is a betrayal? With New York City Jew Trump genocide of Christianity already in progress, only the fools support him. As all political traitors carping at Gregory Allen McCown as illegal authority to be president, the satanic desire to supersede God are those who have no oath of God anyways for office. With state governors and legislatures on the outside of Jew authority looking in at the danger, they can thank God for Gregory Allen McCown Constitution to save their life now in danger. What is history? A lost battalion, aided by as battling bastards of Baltimore to make a last Pentagon stand when the nuclear ballistic railgun rain comes in to shelter a fortress in their midst of distress, the terror being surrounded by vicious Red Army Jew populations seeking their sacrifice. So not everybody in the Pentagon is a communist. They're probably going to have to fight 10 to 12 million Red Jew communists surrounding Washington, D.C. from attempting to destroy their command. Of course, now you can understand state governors were to be in control of the militia county presidents because he was the state executive president. And as a state executive president, he is to command the militia county presidents. And that as the state executive president, he would select out of the the militia county president's commands those who would be the candidates for the military. But now you got the Jews and their billionaires, including the $5 billion trust fund of Donald Trump, creating his own private army as his own federal communist state to kidnap whoever he wants. And he wants to kidnap the whole United States. Now, after I finished writing that, I hadn't watched the news for a couple of weeks. You know, didn't really care what was going on in the world. Then I got God calling me and said, "You got to take a look." So I get to this point in my letter. The terror being surrounded by vicious Red Army Jew populations seeking their sacrifice. Speaking about the military command, Washington, D.C. Turn on the television September 30th. There on the news is Donald Trump in Quantico having an address to all the generals and admirals and their staffs from around the world. And here I am still on my computer that I can still write, and I'm under surveillance, and guess who's watching my surveillance? And here's the whole command all around the world. Now, let me tell you this. This is like 40 years of prophecy, all the way from Tyler, Texas, when I went down there June 28th, 1981. And then I left in like March 3rd, 1983. I was down there 20 months. Learned my stained glass mirror, Columbus art glass, mirror resilvering. The prophecy had been established that I could accomplish it for the Century 9, Quatrain 12 of Hermes and Diane, many little silver pieces. Because now the silver would be the mirror on the back of the mirror glass, and the many little pieces would be the cut glass of the art glass, to manifest a mural of images. So that was just the beginning. So I knew who I was by 1997. when I read Nostradamus' book and I saw that verse, I knew who I was. Then it says, he will be looking for new clay. So the next step was from 1981 stained glass mirror, and I showed my mirror production at Motor City Sign. The next step was looking for new clay, and then I tell them to go to the South African international waters and start their dredging operations. So that was the next step in the verses. So this is going over 40 years, all during the time they're trying to kill me, imprison me from state to state to state. Then, here comes the last verse. And his followers will be soaked in gold. And here it is from 2017 to 2025 when I ordered the gold machine production, designed and to produce, that here comes all the military command from around the world. And I can end the address saying, you're all going to be soaked in gold. All at once. And so this is over 40 years of prophecy from time to time to time to time. And none of the Nostradamus scholars could even imagine what it was all about. Now, the reason they need to be soaked in gold because radiation warfare, and even though Jimmy Carter outlawed neutron bombs during his administration, that didn't mean that they weren't still going to build them. Because communists being communists, they can lie all they want and build anything they want. So while we don't build a neutron bomb, they still did. So the only thing that can stop the neutron bomb from killing our troops is to soak them in gold. So here's my gold machine, like Stevie Nicks' Gold Dust Woman. Put it in paint spray, spray it all over their uniforms, and the whole military command heard it all at once. If Trump knew that was going to happen, he wouldn't have brought them from around the world for his own shenanigans and glorification of, see how powerful I am, I can call you all together. And here I am under surveillance, and I just type out the story, and issuing my commands to the troops and telling them the final prophecy. Well, here's the people that are going to follow me. I'm the one that started the prophecy, and I'm the one you're going to follow at the end of the prophecy because I'm going to help you survive this war. So when God tells me to do something, after I was 2 weeks not watching the television set, and I didn't know any conference was coming or anybody discussed it. I even saw the literature anywhere on it on the television. It just got knocked on my shoulder when I got to a certain point in writing my book. And I was going to write about the future of war at that point on. And he knocked on my shoulder and said, now you need to turn on the television. And it was a big wow moment, let me tell you. Well, I could complete for all my followers that they're all going to be soaked in gold, and they're going to survive the war. And so it was not so much Donald Trump. He's going to be shit-canned in the near future anyways. But the military got an introduction of who was going to take over their command. So, September 30th, and I'm writing, and this would be 7 months before April 30th, 2026. Just 7 months before Gregory Allen McCowan president, question mark. The dynamics of military concepts will have changed to a new generation of superiority, with longer-range weaponry by nuclear ballistic railgun artillery, enemy rear areas hit. Economic conditions will not be able to function once a front line is engaged by nuclear ballistic railgun fire. Originally, the B-52, B-1, B-2, and B-21 with hypersonic missiles will disrupt key industry, eliminating port constructions, airfield deployment with aircraft factories and resources. Key railroad links with road bridges will be daily wrecked to deny any reconstruction effort. What did I just see in this television? A military assembly to see my writing for their briefing? Question mark. You are now entering, after 3 decades of my own self-sacrifice, support your self-sacrifice. 2 hours lunatic speech? Torture honorable by elected or criminally appointed fools? Well, at least you have my prepared edition to inspect for your regard as being prescient. Not president, prescient. 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 And prescient being that I turned on the television because God told me to do it. Now, under military surveillance, I'm typing this out and it's going right back to the military command. You can be assured for a rapid development of the NBR to cover America from aerial assault. Since logistics starts in America, without that, your deployment is a meaningless history note. You may have been told of my F-Series jet tow planes for cargo plane designs established. That is if I am completely out of the picture as far as needs for commanders' overseas effort. Rebuilding the naval yards for logistics shipping over a slow transit system is illogical, especially when a delivery system is readily available by faster air courier system created. This will steadily increase as month to month for deliveries begin to increase everywhere. That immobilizing a nation refused to be mobilized is a state citizen investment initiative, especially Gregory Allen McCowan petition Article 5, We the People, elected president, so that I can save fat generals to be seated in RV command centers, comforts, directing war, and skinny women are best suited for armor command seat that need no muscle strength. When Gregory Allen McCowan elected, you can all resign command supporting Trump, question mark, but maintain your situation under a new president command as to save your nation alive. Get what supplies loaded you can for a certain cutoff of logistics in the near future event. You will be outflanked by a United Nations Army invading America, disrupting logistics. Reserving weapon superiority for this battle expected, you will not immediately get NBR. As I read you the Riot Act, I cannot surrender my weapons to a communist kidnapping. But once the issue is cleared in America of treason, you will get NBR weapons in delivery. At least by Gregory Allen McCowan president, you do have a free We the People support. Then a special moment occurs while I'm writing this out, and they're listening or they're watching, and then a man in the audience says, if Trump knew he was communicating with us directly, question mark, he would be jealous. And I wrote that out after I said it. And then I wrote, I heard it. So immediately the audience heard what one man said, and I wrote it down immediately for the audience to see it, that I was listening. So that surprised the hell out of them. So I have new M4 McCowan tanks, 75 millimeter hypersonic atomic ammunition on the way for war. Navy get new submersible aquatic tanks for appropriate naval defense and marine landing. Air Force will get their new space fighter jets with NBR for aerial superiority over the Earth. We can rebuild the battleships, since if aircraft carriers can survive torpedo by M4 subs, the big guns can return with new hypersonic missile cannon launches on enemy landfall. I've been working a long time behind the scenes for this development to be completed. I had not watched any news for over a week, but called of God for this day to open news, ? Without understanding the situation, I worked from morning to complete my life story. As years of script to educate a government condemned to death by a foreign enemy at hand, I can only applaud your calm demeanor in the face of insulting rhetoric that is un-American. The resources are at hand and increasing from all South African international waters used. The South Atlantic will become a high priority lake to preserve this resource in delivery. That does not mean ordinary steel production will decrease by any means for basic tools. It only means that lead production will swell as needed into gold with metastasized hydrogen metal for a byproduct. Gold used for electronic protection and bodysuits for anti-radiation or of neutron shields. Concurrently, the application previously ignored now becomes an engineering application, only because of use of gold was too expensive, but in abundance is now a necessary shield. Gold as spray paint can then coat older equipment, aircraft, naval ships, and electronics. I do not need to tell engineers first place 2 coats of acrylic before covering in gold shielding. Certainly your duty to preserve life. Certainly your duty to preserve life, ? More valuable than all my gold you can apply in defense. What is this day, September 30th, ? For a military review and $1 million wheel of fortune, ? I cannot read this portion to a national audience, but it will be seen in a limited audience. War is not cheap, neither is life, as I have plenty of gold to cover both for your survival. The American people will never know what just happened in my presentation until later. To go from a turncoat president to a true blue patriot president is a game saving a nation. I could go on, but you have this moment in America to tell them what you need later. Gregory Allen McCowan, Houston, Texas, 2863-2893. September 26, 2025, 5:15:59 a.m. to 9:30, 2025, 7:21:58 p.m. So I was a little over half an hour writing it out. So the question of who was going to lead and who was going to follow was in Quatrain 9, Century 12, Quatrain 9, Century 12 of the little Hermes and Diane by the lake, many little silver pieces. Then I order the excavation of resources off the South Atlantic international waters by dredging. And then the time would come when the entire military command from around the world would be brought by the arrogant bigotry of one man. And I could tell the followers they're all going to be soaked in gold because the gold machine had been created. There was only one man who could create both the Hermes and Diane mirror, order the dredging, and create the gold machine to soak the followers of a military in their defense covered in gold. So in 1997, when I discovered my identity, there was another part of the dredging already told to be performed as the third line. And then I told them I had to make while I was at Motor City Sign, I told them I had to wait a little while before I tell them about the gold machine. Only because it was going to deal with atomic weapons ammunition, and if I started that 3 decades ago, atomic proliferation would be all over the world. As it is, once they got around to understanding what that was all about, they could put increased security to make sure that didn't happen. So during the presentation to the military, I was running it out, and that one gentleman in the audience made a comment. I wrote it out immediately to say that I know what I'm doing. I'm addressing your command. So I wasn't getting patronized in any degree other than to tell them what they're going to be commanding into battle. And I don't give a damn about their physical condition or their size. All they have to do is be educated to properly handle themselves in a discipline during battle for their own survival. So that was a big moment for me to understand that finally the question was answered for me of who was supposed to be soaked in gold following. So the American people know that when I'm telling them what they're going to do to make me president, that when Jesus said I was going to be elected president, he had not spoken in vain. And I'm doing everything to keep you from getting incited to violence and preserve your life for the battle. Because once I'm in control of the authority and I open the consensus and show the American people the tragedy the Jewish people have committed against the United States, they know what's going to happen. And they'll rather fight to the death, even if they're only a quarter of the population to attempt to commit armed overthrow of the remaining 75% of the people. So I got to warn the priesthood. They don't want to go to hell and lie to the American people that, oh, you have to forgive the Jews. When the Jews are trying to kill the American people, there's no forgiveness for that. Satan tried to kill God and Father, and he stopped it by his almighty power and threw him out of heaven. And Satan became that war upon the earth. And Jesus said to Christ Peter, the gates of hell shall not prevail against thee. So Satan's at gates of hell that's presented to despise the American people. And Rabbi Saul wasn't forgiven for the murder of Jesus Christ. Because Satan got thrown out of heaven for just attempted murder. The actual act of murder was not forgiven. And that was a lie. And they've been preaching that lie as if we're been forgiven by God. You can't prosecute us for murder. And then they murder nation after nation after nation. You can't prosecute us for murder. We've been forgiven. And this is the biggest lie that you can preach into any church, is to tell them that when the Jews are killing Americans, you have to forgive them. You want to preach that lie until the day you die. Liars don't get into the kingdom of heaven. Just read it in Revelation chapter 21 and 22. Those who make it and love it to lie will never have eternal life. So you have to tell the American people that this is a family of Jewish blood since the murder of Jesus Christ, lying to the world that they've been forgiven. And since we're all the Christian blood of Jesus Christ, baptized in the Spirit, that the fresh memory of trying to kill Jesus Christ is in our generation still. And we're certainly not going to forgive them. To which our founding forefathers probably understood this all too well, that here come the British Army to commit murder, and there was no forgiving them for what they were going to do. Now, of course, the principle of self-defense is that God wanted his faithful to be defended, and he wasn't going to condemn them for the right to preserve their faith from being killed by a foreign enemy that says that they're forgiven for murder. So they're trying to hide their criminal guilt of what they did in 55 years by sealing that consensus. And when it's open, those who didn't die in the battle will certainly be executed afterwards. And then we're going to have to go around the world to rescue the rest of the Americans, of which I got a chance to say to the American command, we're going to follow up and go right after them. United Nations enemies of the communist kings of fornication that are holding Americans prisoners around the world. So I'm going to take a break. I made a blitz of this, and I'll think of a lot more things that I wish I had said, because there's just so much to speak and say anyways. That could answer all of your questions. Now, one of the other things that I want to say, just to certify this, that I'm not doing this for any monetary reward, nor donations. You're losing enough money to Trump already. In fact, despite me, I had a service of Disney Plus, ESPN Plus, and Hulu. They raised it from $13, $15, $18. Now they're raising it to $19.99. And during the process, all the programs that I watched, they cut out a service to me. Then, the first 3 weeks of the football season, I couldn't see any football games on ESPN Plus that I seen the year before. Then I wrote and complained I'm canceling the service. And then they put the next week games on for me to see, but that's too late. I got a lot of other different things I need to do. From here to April 30th, I'll be very busy in preparing myself for what's about to happen to save the United States. And so I boycotted their Jewish media service in saying, well, don't worry about it. You're the ones had the money stolen from you, and I'm not giving my money to you that Donald Trump stole from you yourself. So, in the boycott of the Jews, we're saving our money from being given to the Jews and let Donald Trump take the the fall for having robbed the money from the Jews themselves. And I still see football games on the weekend, besides the others that Monday night and Thursday. I still see golf on the weekends, besides Thursday and Friday with ESPN Plus. Just that I can separate myself from that time and concentrate on other things that I need to do that are more important in the service of God and the American people. But I'm not sitting here petitioning for any money that is being reduced from your pocket to even dare think you're going to give it to me. I can take care of myself. The United States Title Code 18, Chapter 13, Section 246, relief benefits shall not be denied. So I got this big old hernia. It's like a softball bat next to a softball in the groin. By a sheriff murdering me January 17th, 2004, when I was in the midst of writing the book, Thou Art My Son. So they dragged me off to an Ellis County jail cell to wash off my dead body, clean up my clothes, dry it out, recloth me, and say, he died of a heart attack. And while they were photographing my dead body, God had me resurrected. But the damage had been done. Because when that sheriff dropped his knee on my groin and created my hernia, that would develop from 2004 to 2016, over 12 years, and become unbearable to perform and work. Basically, I can just barely walk around anyways without endangering my life, let alone commit any strenuous activity using my torso to do so, which would put stress on it. And that alone, they had a mesh system that they put inside the body to hold the hernia in, that so that they didn't have to pay the unemployment benefits or the Social Security disability insurance, that they could give a medical service, restore their bodies, and require them to go back to work. Well, that mesh system failed. Miserably so. And so they just had to say flat out, if you got a big old hernia and you qualify, full benefits. So during that time when I was working in Houston, Texas with a hernia, that mesh system was failing until they changed their policy that when you went in with a hernia, and mine has been growing considerably because of the exertion that I had to do at work, caused it to grow. That when I went in and got medically inspected, an Israeli doctor, a Jew, injected in my right ear a cancerous worm that I eventually had to pull out of my ear myself and take my medication, which I from time to time take a leave ALEVE, crush it up, add it with triple antibiotic cream, and then partly with the triple antibiotic ointment, mix it around, gargle that, so that while gargling it, it can apply itself into my throat in the area of the thyroid gland where the cancer was supposed to develop. Well, that was in May 2017, and I'm supposed to be dead of cancer already. So, you know, when I knew an anti-cancer drug, I was going to survive. Now, the shame is that 2 people died of cancer to the brain in the same manner. John Biden and John McCain. And they tried to do it to me, and I survived. Because I was under assault from a Jewish act of war through the federal government of the Social Security Administration, that in the process of receiving my benefits, I used to have a worm injected into my ear with cancer, so that when I was in federal prison, they wouldn't give me medical care and I would be killed. So I got the means to save my life. You know, as Jesus said, physician, heal thyself. As I said in an earlier, the Japanese said there isn't a virus the body can't defeat. There's just a simple enzyme that has to be stopped from inhibiting the white blood cells from killing the cancer. And so, triple antibiotic is, they write on the packet, this is a poison, don't ingest it. So when the Aleve carries the poison to the cancer, guess what dies? Not me, cancer. I don't take much. The grassy knoll assassin said, you don't kill a person all at once with poison, you do it drop by a time. Well, I don't take this all the time. I only take it at periodic times throughout the year. And I don't feel any cancer swelling in my body at this time. So I have been consuming it. But I still have plenty of the supplies around. But I had to do a certain manner of plunging my ear with chemicals. I didn't destroy my ear or anything like that. I was known to have had a hole in my right ear from my youth. So that worm had a place to go into my head anyways. But I flushed it out, and with a cotton swab, caught its teeth when its head was out of the hole, caught its teeth and pulled it out. So that's how big the worm had grown in 2-3 months after May, which would be May 30th when the event happened, June, July, August. Then in like the 3rd week of August, I've made the effort to finally pull it out of my ear. And I showed my friend. There was the teeth, a little vein from its head to a heart. Yeah, the worm had a heart. And luckily for me, the vein behind the tail also got pulled out so that the potential of it regenerating and growth was nil. And it's a sad commentary that the Jewish people killed John Biden and John McCain in the same manner. But trying to kill me in that manner, they betrayed their methodology. And I can only tell you the poisonous hatred of the Jewish people for Christianity in the United States. So that was just another manner of my surviving death. Some manner of number between 0 and 696. So I'm about to finish up here. If you can understand, when I went in to the SSA for SSDI in May 2009 when I first got to Texas, the basic premise wasn't actually to get the benefit. It was just to say I got a medical examination, they certified me capable of working so that when I went out looking for work, I was already pronounced fully capable of working. It's only when the entrapment occurred that I escaped and the hernia was rapidly developing, and I got into job after job after job, a week of job that was promising to be a whole year work, and then I got fired after the week. 4 successive jobs. And for some reason, somebody was stalking me from my employment agency and going to those employers that they found out the information where I was working and told them to get rid of me. And so I was going to be thrown out in the street because I couldn't make payments, couldn't find roommates to help share the payment. The hernia was there. In December 2016, I went in and filed for it. And so I was walking the street during the time for 3 months, 3 weeks before I won $10,000 in DraftKings. I was walking the streets waiting for my SSDI application to be accomplished. And I still had to perform work, however injured I was. And so we went from there. arrested, got released on bond, pulled a worm out of my head, saved my life. And started my series of writings to introduce the world, or at best the church first, and the state governments, that while I went from 2017 starting out with a computer and started addressing these people, which a lot of them I had done prior to that, before 2017, that I had to remind them, tell them every story of attempted murder in between. Why I'm still writing these letters is because God is protecting me and preserving me, that I could save your life. And now the only way I can get you to save your life is you perform your Article 5 Constitution right to peacefully assemble of your Bill of Rights and command the authority of the nation by a majority of the state citizens of their legislatures, not the elected, just the members of the state citizen legislature title you're born into, to command the laws of the United States. And then you'll know who you're going to elect as the President of the United States. Very good. It's getting close to 5:30 Central Standard Time, October 7th, 2026. And I'm at 1 hour and 58 minutes. This is Gregory L. McCowan, 2863-2893, signing off from Houston, Texas. You won't hear me for a while, but there's a lot of hours to listen to me. And I hope I don't sound boring with all the stories that I have to tell, because it would actually, in a strange manner, seem entertaining and terrifying at the same time, that there would be such a population of hatred for an image of a God. And remember, Deuteronomy chapter 12 verses 2 and 3 says to kill a god and the nation that worships a god. And the Jews wrote a law 2,600 years ago to kidnap nations and commit murder. And they're guilty. 2,600, 2,500 years later, kidnapped Russia and murdered 1.5 billion people. They haven't changed in the observance of their law, and now they're invading the United States to kidnap and commit murder of you. You just tell those Jews to go to hell. Sign that petition. Get it certified, stamped, embossed, registered, get your own copy, so that you can prove you're a member of the Book of Life and that you have God as your servant, being the president. Thank you very much, and you have a good evening. Bye-bye. I'm looking for my cursor. There it is. Little mouse, little bugger. Hard to move around sometimes.